Why is it that people like Richard Dawkins and Neil deGrasse Tyson come out with such inane things all of the time about religion? Well, it's fairly simple, and I think the problem is really staring us in the face. Education is something that has become overly specialised and overly stratified in the Western world. Although we have schools that teach all subjects, very early on, in the UK around about 14, they will split the students away into different subjects. You can choose what are known as GCSEs in the UK, which are basically easier APs for those Americans that are watching. And you have a degree of choice over which subjects you choose, and this means that the students get whatever they really pick. You know, they get to do geography, they get to do history, they get to do Latin or Spanish, and they do a certain number of these, and this contributes to their education on the lower level, and then on the higher level they do A-levels where they specialise in about 3 or 4 different subjects. Now, the problem with this is that this means that students often do not get a taste of what the rest of the world has to offer. If you have a student who, understandably, thinking of his financial well-being, goes for mostly science subjects, he's not going to get the experience of the humanities which is necessary for a full life. That is how you end up with Neil deGrasse Tyson, who will mouth off about silly little things about God and not understand what he's actually refuting. And so I would suggest that for these sorts of people, what is necessary is a much, much more hardcore and a much, much more well-rounded education system on the lower level. One that makes students read lots and lots and lots of good books. Not simply sitting in the classroom and mucking around and doing easy things, but actually really forcing them to adapt and to get better at the tasks they're doing until they're raised to a much higher standard. Now, this would not be for everyone. This would be for those who would be well served by going to university. So this would be perhaps the top third of the population. But these people would be taken to specific schools. In the UK, we call them grammar schools. They're done for a slightly smaller percentage of the population here, but the idea would serve the same purpose. You would take the people who would thrive in a university, and you can tell this from their intelligence, or perhaps even their own disposition, and then you force them through lots of much, much harder classes so that they become more competent in other areas. They're not just mathematicians, they're also philosophers, and they're also scientists, and they're also people who are experts in literary criticism. Not simply doing a GCSE and being made to read just 4 books and to analyse them over the period of 3 years, but rather do a GCSE in higher English literature where you have to read 50. Something more like this. Now, what of the rest of the population that isn't up to this? And that's fine. These people often struggle in the current system, in fact. I actually know a teacher of mathematics at one of these schools, and she will take the lower sets of the children around 13, and these people are so unable to figure out what's going on, they can't figure out the area of a square, right? They don't know base times height. And these people are not very well served by this kind of education, as you can well imagine. What's the point in giving 50 books to a person who can't read? There's no point. And so these people will be better served being provided this kind of education in different ways, probably through direct moral lessons, because that's ultimately what the classics will do for you. They'll form your character and make you understand what is practical and what isn't. But also, there ought to be a real strong emphasis on practical education. These people, although they might not be able to work out the area of a square, might be extremely effective at laying bricks. These people are not stupid. I knew a man, in fact, actually, my mother's friend, who didn't have a single GCSE. So for Americans, this is like graduating without a high school diploma, right? Like, this man was, completely unskilled in a paper sense. But the man set up a lot of businesses. The man was not poor. He had a big house because he was a very practical man. He set up a fishing tackle shop, in fact, at one point. And, he did well for himself because he was a practical man who knew how to sell things. And that's what people like this need. They need to be developed in the practical skills of laying bricks or of unclogging toilets and stuff like this so they can earn a respectable income for themselves. As it currently stands with the school system in the UK, They are not doing this before the age of 16, and I can't comment on the effectiveness of BTECs, or I think they're called T-levels now. What they are currently doing is they just languish about studying mathematics that they will never use, and that they aren't very good at, and so is it any wonder that they constantly misbehave? They're not doing something particularly useful. And so if we want to solve both the Neil deGrasse Tyson problem and the problem of delinquency, what we need to do is to provide people with a stratified education system that forces those people at the higher or lower levels to excel in those places where they would excel. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Please donate to my Patreon. I give Latin readers out there if you are interested in learning Latin. And besides that, thank you very much for watching.